Okay. Good afternoon. Let me introduce those that are at the podium. Vanessa Gibson, who chairs the Public Safety Committee of the City Council. Chief of Patrol, Carlos Gomez. Chief of Department, Jim O'Neill. Mayor, Bill de Blasio. Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer. We also have Deputy Commissioner Jesse Tisch, Deputy Commissioner for Technology. She will be giving several presentations to you. We have the Deputy Commissioner that runs our CompStat system, known very well to you, Dermot Shea, at these monthly crime briefings. Dermot will be giving you the overview of the preliminary 2015 crime summary. We also have Chief of Detectives Bob Boyce, who will be able to speak to any of the particular crime situations that have occurred over the last several days that you might want additional information. The purpose of today's meeting is our normal monthly crime briefing that we give each month. This one will be very specifically focused on the whole year of 2015. Some of the numbers that we will be presenting will be preliminary till we close our Uniform Crime Reports, UCR report, to the FBI, but we don't expect that they will change substantially based on the last number of years that we've done this. It's a very good year for us, 2015. 2015 in the sense that it was a record year for tourism in the city, almost 60 million, a record year for Broadway ticket sales, a record year in terms of the special events that this department handled, the Pope, UN visit, also the most recent New Year's Eve event with all the concerns around the heightened issues of terrorism around the world. A very good year in the sense of successful events. It was also a year of tragedy. Once again, we lost several of our officers murdered in the streets of New York, and most recently, Detective Lem killed in Afghanistan while on active duty with the U.S. Air Force. But on the crime front, it's been a continuation of what has been now, going back to the early 1990s, a continuing decline in crime in New York City. And I speak very specifically to the UCR categories, the 7 categories that are covered by the FBI report. This past year, we had a 1.7% decline, overall decline, preliminary figures, in our UCR crime. Coupled with the decrease in 2014, it comes to a 5.8% decline in index UCR crime. I emphasize those 2 years because when this administration, my administration of the police department and the mayor's administration of the city came into office, there was a great deal of concern that the downward trends in crime that began in the early 1990s, which I had some role in assisting back in 1994, 95, and 96, could they in fact continue? Well, they have in fact continued, and while there have been some fluctuations, some increases in certain categories, the overall trend in all of our crime categories continues to go down. As Dermot Shea will reference in his comments, when we take a look at other large cities in this country, major cities, but particularly the next 3 largest, our declines are significantly below, in some instances, significant increases they experienced. So it's been a very good year for the city of New York, a year to celebrate. And as we go into 2016, that we are very well positioned. By the end of 2016, we will have completed the hiring of an additional 1,300 new officers, the first increase since 2001. We'll have the equivalent of 700 additional officers through suburbanization, 2,000 additional officers on the street. Jesse Tisch will be discussing some of the growing technology capabilities the department has that will allow us to continue our precision focus on reducing crime. And we anticipate that 2016 will be another year of crime decline in the city. I'm going to ask the mayor to come up and speak relative to what I've just referenced in outline form. Following the mayor, that Dermot Shea will be up to give a more intimate perspective on the various crime categories that I've just referenced. I'd like to thank the mayor, city council, and the other elected officials who have been very supportive of this department, particularly in our budget processes. We are very well funded to meet the concerns of the citizens of New York and the many people who visit this city. And a lot of that funding will really take hold this year, 2016, particularly in the area of new police officers, new technology, and new skills. And so I'd like to, as I bring the mayor up, thank him in front of this group for that continuing support and leadership in keeping public safety the #1 priority of the city. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, sir. Very much. Well, thank you, Commissioner Bratton. You have a lot to be proud of today. All the men and women of the NYPD have a lot to be proud of as we look back on 2015. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who was a part of the extraordinary preparations for New Year's Eve. and all the officers who served that day. We have to always remember these officers, like all of us, would love to be home with their families, but they were where they were needed, and that was a holiday for everyone else, but not for them. The end result, a beautiful job on New Year's Eve. It came off without a hitch. It was a safe, secure environment. Commissioner Bratton and I said to some of the folks in the media who interviewed us in the day or two before New Year's, one of the safest places in America to be that night would be at Times Square, and lo and behold, that was true. So when you look back on 2015, remember how well New Year's Eve went, remember how well the Thanksgiving parade went, remember how well the Pope's visit went, and that credit goes to the leadership team here at the NYPD and to all of the men and women of the NYPD who do the job every day. They took just three among many examples that we could raise, three extraordinarily difficult events and made them look easy. That's how good they are, and it's a lot to be proud of. These numbers overall are extraordinary, but I want to start by talking about another example of what our officers do every day. So the numbers are powerful. You know, there's been some debate about numbers versus the reality of human lives. Both matter. We have to measure by the numbers. The statistics tell us a lot. They represent human beings. They represent families. They represent things that deeply affect people's lives. But it's also important to hear the human stories. It's also important to put a human face on the extraordinary work of the NYPD. So I want to give you an example right now. This last Saturday, 5 officers from Midtown North proved once again what the NYPD does in the face of adversity and what a huge difference it makes in people's lives. There was a tourist from Scotland. He was in a cab near the corner of West 52nd Street and Broadway. He lost consciousness. He was struggling to catch his breath. And the 5 officers I'm about to speak about are right over there, and I'll name each of them, and I want to thank them all. And as you hear this story, you'll appreciate why. Well, so this tourist was in dire shape, and that is when Officer Joanna Tojaj, I hope I'm saying that right, who had been picking up barriers after the New Year's Eve celebration, came to the tourist's aid and started administering CPR. Then officers David Vasquez and Matthew Widmer came to the scene. They didn't hesitate. They helped administer CPR, got additional assistance there. About a minute later, officers William Hellbach and Timothy Landy arrived with a defibrillator, and they were able to stabilize the man from Scotland until the FDNY EMS crews arrived. I'm proud to say, and pleased to say, the man is now recovering at the NYU Medical Center. He is alive and well because of these 5 officers. Let's give them all a round of applause right now. So when they think about protecting and serving, I'm sure each one of them has other great examples they could raise, but here's one. A life they saved, a person who will keep walking this earth, a family that will be intact because of the work that these 5 officers did. And that happens every single day in this city, and we have to always remember to appreciate the work of our officers. Now, it is related to the fact that we choose our officers well, that we train our officers better than ever, that we provide them with what they need to do their job, and in fact, with each passing year, that effort gets better and better. Our officers are given better tools than ever before, and it shows. And I want to give credit to Commissioner Bratton and the whole leadership team up here for constantly focusing on how to take this winning team that is the NYPD and make it stronger every single year. Better training, better technology, better equipment, the things that also keep our officers safer. The new vests and the technology, the training also are crucial to keeping our officers safer. So this is a constant dynamic of progress, and that has been the watchword of Commissioner Bratton's entire career. I want to thank all the other leadership of the NYPD up here. And as Commissioner Bratton said, a lot of the progress we have made has been because of the support of the City Council. So thank you, Chair Gibson, and to all the members of the Council. Thank you, Borough President Brewer, for your support. Elected officials have been very, very supportive as we've made a series of changes and improvements in the work of the NYPD. 2015 Not only did we prove the point that Commissioner Bratton raised earlier, that the success he started, and the men and women of this department started in the early 90s, could and would continue. We did it at the same time as we drew police and community closer together. We said over the last 2 years we could have a safer city and a fairer city at the same time. These numbers, these statistics for 2015 prove it. Yes, both can be done, both have been done. And as Commissioner said, we're very proud of the fact that over the 2 years that we've been here, a combined 5.8% drop in major crime. That proves the point that, in fact, by bringing police and community closer together, it makes us constantly safer. We're very pleased with the numbers for 2015. As you heard, about a 1.7% drop in major crimes. Again, that is preliminary information. We believe that the investments we're making are part of the success story, and that's why we're going to continue those investments, making sure the men and women of this department have in their hands the information they need. That's the iPhones and the tablets. Making sure they have the best information to help them in investigations. That's ShotSpotter. And making sure that we have the personnel we need to continue this progress. And I've said it, but I want to emphasize it. It's not just fighting the most serious crimes, the most violent crimes. We want to constantly deepen our focus on quality of life crimes. As the PD does a better and better job at bringing down violent crime and serious crime, it's opening up the space and the time and the energy to go after a whole host of quality of life crimes too. Those 2,000 more officers, the 1,300 that came out of the budget with the help of the council, the 700 who are going to have opportunity to serve on the streets through civilianization, 2,000 more officers in patrol strength by this point next year. That's going to help us to go even farther. And I'm looking forward to the successes that those officers will bring. Obviously, even though I made the point that these big events have come off without a hitch, and we've seen for 14 straight years the NYPD protect us effectively against terrorism. We said it over these last weeks. It is true. We are the best prepared city in this nation to prevent terrorism. We're going to keep deepening our investment on that front. The 500-plus members of the Critical Response Command coming online now are going to add immeasurably to our ability to prevent terrorist acts. And some other very big initiatives we care about. We care deeply about getting guns off the streets. At the end of 2015, gun arrests had gone up almost 10% compared to the year before. We are very, very pleased with that progress and expect to see more. And Vision Zero, a tremendous success story. NYPD has been at the core of the successes of Vision Zero. To put it in perspective, the year before we all came into office, 297 traffic fatalities. At the end of this year, 230. That's real progress, and a big part of it was the enforcement by the NYPD. 3 times as many tickets given for failure to yield to pedestrians, twice as many speeding tickets. This is very much a part of why more people are alive today and didn't die in those traffic crashes because of the great work of the NYPD. So in 2016, we will build further. We very much look forward to the presence of our new officers. As the Commissioner said, the first time we're getting this kind of infusion of new officers in well over a decade. It's going to make a big difference. And we look forward to all of these initiatives, the training, the technology, really coming into full force in 2016 and making this an even safer city. Just very quickly in Spanish. Me complace anunciar que el año 2015 fue el más seguro en la historia de nuestra ciudad. Los crímenes mayores continúan en niveles históricamente bajos con una reducción de casi 2% comparado con el año anterior gracias al NYPD. Este año tendremos 1,300 policías nuevos y cientos más en nuestro nuevo equipo especial antiterrorista. Con el aumento del personal y nuestras inversiones en tecnología y recursos para la policía, Nueva York seguirá siendo la ciudad grande más segura en la nación. Thank you to everyone, and congratulations for this extraordinary success.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dermot Shea, Deputy Commissioner Dermot Shea will present more of the details specific to the 2015 crime decrease, and will reference some of the 2014 also during his presentation. He'll then be followed by Jesse Tisch, at which point we'll open it up to questions specific initially to the crime report we just gave you, and then we'll be able to open it up into the larger public safety topic area for any questions you might have relative to public safety issues in the city. With that, Dermot Shea. Dermot.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'll begin by hitting some of the top accomplishments that we'd like to note in this end of the year 2015 crime briefing. Commissioner mentioned 1.7% down. He mentioned the 5.8 over 2 years. But within those numbers, there were some significant accomplishments since January 1 of 14. Murder incidents, lowest total last year in 2014 recorded, 333. Robbery incidents, 2014, lowest total in the Comstat era, and these are Comstat era time periods that I'm quoting. That was 2014, lowest robberies. Burglaries, lowest burglary number in 2014, and then surpassed by 10% in 2015. Grand larceny auto, that's stolen vehicles. 2015, we registered the fewest number of stolen vehicles since we began tracking index crime GLAs with Comstat. We hit burglaries, we hit robberies, we've hit GLAs, we've hit murders, and that's all within the past 24 months. How did we do this? We did this by having the lowest arrest number since 2003 this year, targeted enforcement. I'll run briefly through the city in some areas that we see before I get into the individual crime types and summarize them. In the geography of the 5 boroughs, not all boroughs were down in crime this year. 2 boroughs saw a slight crime increase. Manhattan was up approximately 3% in crime. Driving Manhattan, and of concern to us, is some of the robbery conditions, particularly on the midnight in and around clubs. Bronx had a 4% increase. The Bronx's 4% crime increase actually correlates against a phenomenal shooting reduction that we achieved this year in the Bronx. So that's a bit of an anomaly. So Manhattan and the Bronx saw increases. Queens, Staten Island, and Brooklyn were all down in crime, and that's your sum 1.7% decrease. Again, all of these numbers are preliminary. Transit. Transit overall makes up 2%, and that number really doesn't change year over year. 2% of the New York City crime occurs in transit, index crime. This year on transit, we had an 11% increase in transit-related index crime. What was driving it was grand larcenies and, to a lesser degree, robberies. On the grand larceny front in transit, and remember, this is all achieved when we have record ridership. Grand larcenies, particularly people falling asleep, which Joe Fox has mentioned numerous times, falling asleep, waking up, and their property is taken from them. That's really what we saw driving the numbers this year in transit. Over 2 years, transit crime is down 5%, but nevertheless up 11% this year. And how is that in a raw number? It's 244 crimes additional this year in the transit system across all of New York City. Housing. Housing makes up approximately 5% of New York City's index crime. We had an increase of 23 crimes occurring on housing authority property across New York City this year. That was a less than 1% increase. We had a reduction of 2 homicides that occurred in housing, and we had an increase of 4 shooting incidents that occurred in housing. And when you look at housing going back 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it is amazing that to this day, the number of shootings that are occurring on housing does not really fluctuate between 17 and 20%, and that's exactly where we were this year. 20% of New York City's shootings occurred on housing. How do we target it? Examples of the case taken down by gang units, narcotics units, Detective Bureau units in the Bronx last month in December, when we took a federal case takedown in the 40th precinct centering on violence on housing authority property. Murder. This year, preliminary CompStat book on December 31st posted a number of 348 recorded homicides in 2015. I will tell you that that number is going to change. I'm sure Bob Boyce is going to get into an incident that happened on December 28th, just reported to us now in Brooklyn in the 61st precinct. But the 348 that you may see on the preliminary sheet was an increase of 4.5%, or an increase of 15 homicides this year, on top of last year's record low. How do we see the homicides in New York City occurring? 83% of the homicides fall into two categories: shootings and then stabbings, cutting instruments. 68% of the homicides in 2015 were by gunfire, and that's a jump of 21% over last year. 68%, we've said before at press conferences, is a little bit high. Normally we see a range 57, 58, maybe 60. 68 is a little bit high, and it's something that we've been facing and trying to tackle all year with the gun violence. We see the opposite trend on cutting instrument homicides. We are down significantly. 34 fewer people died this year by a cutting instrument, and that was a 41% decrease. So knives and guns, 83%, but going this year at least in opposite directions. The remaining categories that I'll focus on, and then there's several miscellaneous, but the remaining two categories of how people are falling victim of homicide in New York City is: one, physical force, 7%. That's somebody that's punched, falls down, hits their head. We had 3 tragedies this year of babies actually being thrown out of windows, physical force. 6% of our homicides were by blunt object, hit with something, typically a bat, something along those lines. What is the general motive that we see more than any other in the homicides? Gang motivated. And then we talk about gang motivated. I killed you because furtherance of the gang. And then we talk about gang related. We may have killed each other, or I killed you for one reason, but it wasn't in furtherance of the gang, but I'm a gang member. 37% of our homicides involve somebody that we know of involved in a gang, and that number likely is higher. Domestic homicides were down this year, a decrease of 19, which is a pretty substantial number. We still had 46, but it's 46 versus last year, 65, which is a 29% decrease. I will move quickly here. Who are we seeing involved in these homicides? On the victim side, males dominate, 86%. In terms of ethnicity, African American is 64% of the victims, Hispanic is 27%, white is 6%, and Asian is 3%. Age categories. Some good news is, despite those 3 tragedies of babies being thrown from windows, the category of birth to 9 years old, we saw a decrease in that category of homicide, 10 versus 17 last year. We've actually, while we still see both on the homicide and the shooting front, 18 to 24 generally takes up the biggest bulk, we saw a slight shifting older. And 18 to 24 still makes up the majority, but when we talk about growth, late 20s, 30s, 40s are gaining a little traction. Arrest history, on the victim side of homicides, nearly everyone has an arrest history in New York City in the past, 78%. And the one I will bring to your attention is the parole. And let me just say this beforehand. When we talk about what we've accomplished this year, it's not just the NYPD, certainly. We are working closer than ever with Kings County District Attorney's Office, the Bronx DA, Manhattan DA's office, Richmond County. We're talking about Queens DA, our partners on the federal side, Eastern, Southern District. We are working closer than ever with probation, New York City, and New York State parole. And on literally at this point, a daily and weekly basis, sharing information back and forth. Part of the reason why is this next statistic. We still have nearly 10%. It's currently 9% of our homicide victims are on active parole at the time that they're killed. Perpetrator side, 90% male. And then in terms of ethnicities, the numbers bear out and hold roughly the same. Shooting incidents, New York City. 1,137 shooting incidents versus 1,172 last year. It's a 3% drop. When you see the numbers of shooting incidents, 2013, 14, and 15 are what we like to call now the new normal, substantially lower, over 200 shooting incidents lower than any of the prior years. And we're still in that little trough. 3% drop this year in shooting incidents, 35 fewer incidents, with a total of 48 fewer people shot. And these are real people. Gang still rears its ugly head on the shooting side. Gang-motivated shootings increased. They are now up 18% this year. It's a raw number, 45 more shooting incidents, and this is in a year when we're down in shootings. 46%, nearly 50% of our shooting incidents involve somebody in a gang. One borough that, even in a good year, when we drastically knocked out the number of shootings, and any is too much, we realize, a couple areas of the city did see spikes. Manhattan, plus 29 shootings. Brooklyn housing was plus approximately 15 shootings. So there are always areas that we're looking to further reduce. On the victim side of who's getting shot, the numbers, for the most part, mirror the homicide numbers. But the arrest history, I will point out, 79% of the people have an arrest history. It tends to be people that know each other, just like the homicides, and people that are out late at night engaged in some sort of criminal activity. That is the summary of the shootings and homicides that we still see. Moving off the violence, 3 categories of crime was up this year, despite being down 1.7% in crime. Murder, which was the 4.5% increase, rape, which was up about 6%, and robbery, which is up about 2%. First, rape, 6% up in recorded rapes. The word recorded is very important here, because when we drill down and analyze the rape reports that come across our desk in the NYPD in calendar year 2015, we learn that almost 21% of them, someone is reporting to us that they were raped well in the past, prior to 2015. When you do that type of a drill down, you see that this year we had 20. But numbers can play a funny game. I just caution that as these months now, January, February, March, come, I believe that we will get rapes reported that happened last year and change those numbers. But that is just a strict look at the numbers as they stand now. 3 categories of rape that we track closely in New York City. Acquaintance rapes, 52% of all rapes, the individuals know each other. Then we have a further category, they know each other closer, domestic rapes. That's 37%. 89% of the rapes fall into those 2 categories, acquaintance and domestic. The stranger rape is something totally different. Stranger rapes account for 11% of the rapes. It's between 11 and 12%. And this category somebody was the victim of a stranger rape, they came in right away and reported it. So this is, they are up, and where are they? They're up in Brooklyn and the Bronx predominantly this year. That is driving a stranger rape phenomenon. One thing I definitely wanted in the last 4 days. Women going out to a bar or a nightclub in Manhattan, believing that they're doing the right thing. They don't want to drink and drive. They want to get home safe and get in a cab. And I've seen yellow cabs, green cabs. I've seen multiple companies. I won't mention any company by name, but it's all one app that you This is something really that people need to be aware of. And like any case in New York City, the buddy system works. When you're going out home with somebody, about 10%, 9 to 10% of the stranger rapes that I saw fall into that category. Robberies, briefly. 2014, I mentioned, was the best year in going back 20 years looking at CompStat crime that we've seen in robbery. We're up 2% from that. We would still be down double digits. We'd be down 2000, looking back to January 1 of 14, we'd be down 12%. So we percent reduction in burglaries in New York City. We were down 10%. Where did we make that reduction in burglary complaints this year? By far in residential burglaries. We look at 3 categories of burglaries: residents, to the top of a bodega and going through the roof. And then a third category, which is the smallest, is breaking into a commercial truck on New York City makes it a burglary. So phenomenally low, the lowest we've ever seen year in burglaries this year, down 10%. Grand larceny auto, lowest number we've ever seen in New York City this year. School crime, and I am finishing up now, down 11% in school-related index crime across. Good homicides, but we were up on domestic-related shootings. Sometimes you try to make sense of these numbers going in different directions. We were up 34 versus 24, up 10 domestic shootings. All right, it's an increase of 42%, small numbers. Our detectives are right on those and making quick arrests, but crime, homicides down, domestic-related shootings, which is troubling, saw a slight increase. I'll talk about going forward, summarizing what's the major objective and what are we struggling with as we go forward. People being arrested over and over, dominating small number of people when we catch them, and then our detective bureau is putting 10 to 15 separate arrests on them for robberies. So focusing on that core population that is driving crime throughout New York City. We still see, of all our shooting incidents, 1 out of 5 has been involved in a prior incident in New York City before. We have people, as we've said before, involved in multiple shooting incidents in 2015. So that gangs, guns, and recidivism and how they relate to each other. Lastly, activity. How did our officers do this? Well, when we look at the activity, I mentioned that arrests were at the lowest level since 2003. You have to go back September 2001. From that day forward to the end of 2001, the arrest number dropped. But that was not our lowest number in the last 20 years. The lowest arrest numbers recorded were 2002 and 2003, because that was a full 12 months of being pulled for other assignments. This year's arrest total is within 1,000 of 2003's arrest total. That is a significant drop. How significant? We were down 48,000 arrests just this year. 13% reduction. Over 2 years, we're down 54,000 arrests in New York City. What type of arrests? Well, there's a story behind this too. When you look at felony arrests, and again, focus. Felony arrests are down 3%. Misdemeanor arrests are down 12%. The lowest level arrests, the violation arrests, are down 15%. Focus. We have reduced arrests drastically, but not so much on the felony side. When you look at guns, the mayor mentioned we are up almost 10% in gun arrests this year. Marijuana-related arrests. We made 11,000 fewer marijuana arrests. That includes sale, felony possession, and the category that makes up most of it, the low-level criminal possession 4 and 5. 11,000 fewer marijuana arrests this year. It's a 33% reduction. That's on top of the big reduction last year. We have not seen this low level of marijuana arrests in New York City since 1997. So 18 years. Couple other benefits when you see the targeted cases that Chief O'Neill and I are constantly pushing every week at ComStat on individual people that we know are responsible for violence, whether it's on a block in the 4-6 precinct or it's in a housing development in the 73rd precinct. Specific cases, working with our partners. When you look at types of arrests of us engaging with the public, that is down. We see fewer assaults on police officers. We have 241 fewer arrests where that charge is necessitated this year. We have resisting arrest charges that have dropped significantly. Over 3,200 fewer times this year have we had to charge that offense. And lastly, criminal court summonses, because it's not just the arrests. 48,000 arrests down. When you look at the criminal court summonses, we are down 63,000 just this year. And when you look at the 2 years, we're down over 30%. Significant, significant numbers. And I will take questions at the end.
Quick summary of Jermit's presentation, that overall crime continues to go down. Police activity as it relates to what we call the peace dividend in terms of people being arrested, people being cited, people being summoned, going down, reflective of the city itself getting safer with less need for police interruption of behavior. As we go forward into 2016, we're going to benefit on the already significant trends that he talked about with the technology advances that are coming online, some of which you're already aware of, that are now going to be fully implemented in 2016. Jesse Tisch will give you a brief summary of those three initiatives. And those three are only some of the many that we're actually working on this year. Jesse.
All right. I am going to start with an update on our ShotSpotter program, which many of you will remember went live in the middle of March last year in 2 boroughs, in Bronx and Brooklyn. In total, our current ShotSpotter deployment covers 15 square miles. And I'm going to give you some 10-month numbers as we end 2015. It's not a full 12 months because it started in March. But here goes. So for ShotSpotter, in 2015, we had 1,672 alerts. 1,000 plus were in Brooklyn, and just shy of 500 were in the Bronx. Of those alerts, 74% did not have 911 calls associated with them. For example, 18 seconds after the new year, on Kings Highway in the 6-7 precinct, we heard this. You could play it. Oh, can you turn the sound on? You can turn it off. In total, there were 28 shots fired associated with that ShotSpotter alert, no 911 calls. More than half of the alerts came from 2 precincts in 2015. The 6-7 had 328, and the 7-3 had 325. 856 of the alerts were for multiple gunshots, with an average number of 3 rounds per incident. And Sunday and Saturday were our 2 biggest days of the week, obviously Saturday night into Sunday. Now let's talk about evidence recoveries. We had evidence recoveries in 19% of our ShotSpotter alerts. We had evidence recoveries with no 911 calls associated in 5% of our ShotSpotter alerts. There were 293 incidents where a ShotSpotter activation was made and ballistic evidence specifically was recovered. Of those, we made 65 positive ballistic matches in the federal IBIS system. So to recap, 22% of the time that we recover ballistic evidence based on ShotSpotter activations, we are able to match those bullets to bullets previously fired by the same gun at other scenes. This adds tremendous investigative value, linking cases and shooters together. Now let's talk about firearms recoveries and arrests. Total firearms recoveries with ShotSpotter activations was 32. 13 of those recoveries did not have 911 calls associated with them. And we had 21 firearm arrests associated with ShotSpotter activations. 8 of those arrests did not have associated 911 calls. So here's a recent example. At 03:20 hours on Thursday, December 10th, members of the 7-5 Precinct Anti-Crime Team responded to a ShotSpotter alert for one shot fired at a residential location, 589 Snedeker Avenue. That was the shot. Upon arrival, the officers commenced an initial perimeter search, which was met with negative results. Familiar with the area, the officers proceeded toward an adjacent abandoned building, where they noticed a commotion emanating from a window on the second floor. As the crime team made their way to the entryway of the location, they encountered 3 males attempting to flee. Upon further investigation, a .32 caliber revolver that's on the screen behind me with 1 spent shell casing was recovered, resulting in the arrest of the 3 suspects. There were no 911 calls associated with that ShotSpotter alert. Other things with ShotSpotter, we are pushing information that we gather from ShotSpotter at CompStat, making commanders address clusters of shots fired alerts even before victims are attached. We're using intelligence collected from ShotSpotter to inform our deployments based on where shootings are occurring and where they might occur, for example, in preparation for a possible retaliation. Moving forward, we have plans to push ShotSpotter alerts direct to the NYPD smartphones and tablets. We're also in the process of building out our Argus camera system. That's our anti-crime cameras, doing focused deployments of anti-crime cameras in locations where we have ShotSpotter. Here are a few examples. December 3rd, 21:30 hours, ShotSpotter alert at 2343 Newkirk Avenue, 1 shot. June 14th, 03:16 hours, ShotSpotter alert at 705 Portland Avenue, 2 shots. September 7th, 17:30 hours, ShotSpotter alert at 625 Grafton Street, 7-3 Precinct, 8 shots. ShotSpotter is also assisting the Detective Bureau, and for a recap on that, I'd like to ask Chief Boyce.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 10 days ago on Christmas morning, at about 3:47 in the morning, on Fenimore Street and Troy Avenue in the 7-1 precinct, we had a ShotSpotter alert to 5 shots fired at that location. We initially respond, and about 45 minutes later, we looked, there was no one on the street at the time. About 45 minutes later, we have a person walking to Kings County Hospital with a gunshot wound to his left thigh. We then start peeling it back. When we start speaking to that individual, he's very uncooperative. Basically, he says he's walking down the street, he felt pain and was shot. What was curious about him was that he had no hole in his pants, and when we talked to the emergency room doctor, the round had a downward trajectory. I have some video here I just want everybody to show. Would you bring that up, please? Here's the individual walking in. You see a free, easy gate. He's going back into his house directly after the shots were fired. And please, special attention, that's a gun in his left hand. And he takes it out, puts it in his right hand, and starts to put it in his waistband. Please watch carefully. At this point, we believe he shoots himself accidentally in the left leg, and you're going to see him hobble into the elevator bank box directly thereafter. And we stop there. Clearly, at that point, you could tell his gait has changed, and he's apparently in substantial pain from this gunshot wound. When we look at this individual, he's got 1 prior for a gun arrest, which we see time and time again. People who carry guns like to carry guns. He's completely uncooperative with us. Now we find in that lobby there a .40 caliber shell. We matched that up to the 40 caliber shells outside found, and we have a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and he's arrested for it. Again, when Commissioner Tisch mentioned that, I didn't think this would be this of great investigative value. ShotSpotter, it is, and it keeps getting better all the time. We recently had a male shot in Queens. We followed the caliber to an IBIS hit, which is a ballistic hit in Brooklyn. So time and time again, this has paid off for us. This is a great example of that.
All right, just very quickly, in March, we will be expanding our ShotSpotter deployment, an additional 9 square miles in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan North. And then in further phases, which are still very much in the planning phase, we intend to total out at about 60 square miles with ShotSpotter in every geographical borough in the city. I'm going to move on now to a new initiative that went live on January 1st, which is GPS in NYPD vehicles. The technology is called AVL, Automatic Vehicle Location. It's essentially GPS in our department's cars. AVL is currently installed in approximately 5,000 department vehicles. Our first focus was on marked patrol or emergency response vehicles. The technology gives us certain basic information about the vehicle, its exact location, the engine status, is it off or on, and if a vehicle is moving, the vehicle's speed and course. We marry that information with the names of the officers assigned to each vehicle and the vehicle's daily assignments. On the screen above me is a live look at AVL in the NYPD's domain awareness system. We have pulled up vehicles assigned to the 7-5 precinct, which is in East New York, in Brooklyn for demonstration purposes, but this is live data. Let's hone in on a vehicle on the map. If we hover over the vehicle, we see the vehicle's speed, its ignition status, the officers it's assigned, etc. And if we click on it, we can see where it has been. We have the option to look at the vehicle's movements over 8 hours, 24 hours, or to choose a custom time period. Let's see if we can pull that up. Okay, we zoom out. So there you see the vehicle's trail over a 24-hour period. The lighter colors are farther back in time. While we're looking at this map, I want to note that we can easily select vehicles by command assigned, which we've done, which is a 7-5, or by present location. So for example, the CO of the 7-5 can see the location of all the vehicles assigned to his command, but he can also choose to see the location of all NYPD vehicles currently within his command. It's a very big difference. Now, why did we put this GPS technology in our cars? Obviously, it's very important for officer safety. We always know where the officer's vehicle at the very least is. And of course, it's a huge efficiency tool. It takes us a large step in New York City towards digital dispatch, meaning dispatching officers to respond to 911 calls based on their location. Eventually, when we marry the smartphone technology with this AVL technology in the vehicles, which we're beginning to do, we can begin to think about moving towards or closer towards digital dispatch. Now that I've spoken a little bit about smartphones, let me move away from the AVL technology and give you a brief update on where we are with our smartphone deployments. Just to remind everyone, we committed to giving every officer a smartphone and putting a tablet in every marked patrol vehicle. So to date, in about 6 months' time, we've given out 20,000 smartphones and 1,000 tablets. We have committed to getting all numbered patrol transit housing commands, as well as the Special Operations Division, SRG, CRC, complete by February, and to have all 35,000 smartphones and the tablets deployed in March. So what do the officers do with the applications or with the smartphones? We've built 6 custom applications for them. And I'll just briefly walk you through each one. The first is a 911 application on which the officers can see all jobs that are assigned to him or her and view the 911 text associated with that job. So no longer does the officer have to rely on the dispatcher to read what the call taker has put into the system. The officer can see the 911 text associated with the job he or she is responding to direct on their smartphone. In addition to the 911 text, for each job, the officers also get an overview of the location that they're responding to. So have there been a history of 911 calls for shots fired there? Are there any active warrants there? Are there history of arrests there? Things that officers might want to know before they enter a location for officer safety, and of course, also efficiency. Also in that 911 application, a boss can see the location of where the vehicles are, not only what jobs that they are assigned to, and of course the officers assigned to each vehicle. I didn't give you a full demonstration of it because it has personally identifiable information, and we want to be careful about how that works. In addition to the 911 application, we also have a search application, which has dramatically changed the way we do warrant checks, license plate checks, building checks, weapon checks. Finally, we have given NYPD officers access to the information that they need to do their jobs where they need it the most, which is in the field. No more calling Central to run a license check. No more going back to the command for an investigator if they want to run a building or a name. It's now all in the palm of their hand. We also have a forms application, which allows officers to fill out forms. Right now, it's just the aided card, but soon it will be the accident card and eventually the complaint on their smartphone. We're hoping to get them away from walking around with this, all of the paper that they use to fill out. Now they will be able to do it direct on their smartphone. Another application is messaging, and this one is important for officer safety. So we now have the ability with a messaging app to get information to our officers based on where they're assigned or where they physically are. So if we have a missing child in the first precinct, we can blast a message with a picture of the missing child to every phone that is physically within the first precinct or physically within Lower Manhattan. If we have a detail working a parade route, we can blast a message to every phone, every officer working that parade route based on assignment or based on their physical location. That's a capability we never had before, and that's also something we intend to use for officer safety. We have a crime information center, which is another app, which we can pull up wanted flyers, missing persons, and the like. And finally, we have a videos application that allows officers to see training videos and other videos put out by the department. Very soon, we will be moving into mobile fingerprint scanning. These mobile fingerprint scanners attach to the smartphones or the tablets, and we are going to begin a pilot in the coming weeks to begin scanning fingerprints out in the field rather than all the time having to bring people back to the precinct house to do that.
We are available for on topic initially, but then we can broaden it out to any public safety related questions that you might have. The experience we have had has not been a surprising one because it mirrors the experiences in most other cities that have put in that technology. That's 75% of the public failing to call in shots fired is pretty consistent in many other cities around the country. But as Jesse reported, we get incredible value from it because we get to scenes where there are no 911 calls, we make arrests, we recover evidence that helps Bob Boyce and his detectives make cases. So similar to back in 1994 when we started tracking shooting incidents, as we move forward, this is just another tracking of information relative to shootings that will help us get a better picture of what's actually happening in the city. And over time, that we would hope that as we go up to 60 square miles, that we in fact see a decrease in the number of shootings documented by a ShotSpotter and an increase in the public calling in when they do hear it with the understanding that we will come. David? Let's ask Dermot and Bob Boyce, who spent a lot of time investigating these, to give you the specifics on that.
David, off the top of my head, three things really jump out. Number one, the intelligence and the knowledge of who is doing burglars. When a career burglar is getting out of prison now, we know about it. We're not following this person around, but we have an awareness, and it would be something curious to me if there's a sudden spike right where that person used to do burglaries. It's just another piece of data for awareness purposes. The second factor would be not just for burglaries, but the DNA capabilities and the role that DNA has played for shootings. We're hoping that it really significantly improves the sentencing on our gun arrests, and for purposes of burglaries, a crime where often we have absolutely no witness, it provides an integral lead for our detectives. The last category is something that we started a couple years ago for the robberies, when the iPhones were a big up and coming and everyone was trying to steal iPhones across the country, it seemed. The attention to detail and tracking of property really has paid dividends in tracking down after the fact somebody that's stolen property and leading us to the burglars. So that's three things right off the top of my head that when you look back 5 years ago really wasn't done to the extent it is now.
If I may, that Jesse has one additional brief presentation that of benefits certainly to you and the press, of significant benefits to the public, initiative that the mayor, in his emphasis on transparency of our numbers, Gail Brewer has been particularly involved in this as Manhattan Borough President, requesting this and participating with us. And it's what we describe as CompStat 2. It's taking the CompStat system and the information that we used internally and finding a way to get it out to the public, to you and the media, in a much more intimate, transparent fashion, so that's beginning around February of this year, the public will literally be able to take a much closer look at what's going on in the neighborhoods as it relates to the CompStat information that we gather. Jesse?
So I want to start out by just saying that last Tuesday, December 29th, the NYPD took the unprecedented step of releasing incident-level data of the 7 major felony crimes to the public. That covered the first 3 quarters of 2014. The incident-level data is considered the gold standard for transparency and open data because it describes the details of a specific incident. The department has historically shared data that only contains aggregate values for crime totals, which can constrain the interpretation and limit citizen engagement with it. I just want to say that the effort involved a lot of collaboration with the Office of the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer, the Vera Institute of Justice, the Reinvent Albany, and the members of the New York City Transparency Working Group. We at the NYPD are not stopping there. In our effort to become the most transparent police department in the country, we are planning to put out a new tool on our website which will give the public unprecedented access to NYPD data. That tool will be made available in February, And that tool will essentially give the public access to the same technology that the NYPD uses internally to look at and track our data. So what we've done and what we're going to let the public access is we've digitized our CompStat book. This is the weekly CompStat book that gets the Bible, as Commissioner Bratton says, that gets printed over and over again each week. Each precinct prints it out. Behind me on the screen is the digitized version of this book. And so all the officers have to do is they click on any number in the book, and it pulls up those numbers on the map. We can click on the shooting number. We're in the 7-5 precinct. We'll click on the shooting number, and it'll pull up all shootings in the 7-5 precinct. The public will also be able to slice and dice that data. There's a very neat charting tool, which I'm not going to demonstrate right now. We'll leave that for another day. But that will allow you to slice and dice the data based on things like what days of the week did the shootings occur, what time of day. All the different categories that we use to track crime are made available now to the NYPD and will soon in February be made available to you and to the public on the NYPD's website.
Let me open it up for any questions that you might have at this time on public safety issues. It's not a new emphasis on transparency. It's a continuing evolution of it as we develop capabilities that allow us to share information. First, CompStat in '94, we shared intimate information within the department that had not been available to the department as a whole. Over time, that we are now in a position to push it out to 35,000 cops through smartphones. The amount of information that cop is going to have in his hand is basically just about everything I can get sitting at my computer up in my office. Now we're making it available to the public and making it available to you. A lot of the requests that you make of us, you're going to be able to sit at your computer and basically punch it up. It'll do pie charts, it'll do bar graphs, it'll day of the week, month, week to day, month to year. Literally what I expect my precinct commanders to do, that I'm going to expect my NCOs to do in the new sectors, that the public can take a close look and see what's going on in their neighborhood. It's my compliments to Justin and your people, that phenomenal growth of technology in the department. Nobody in America is going to have this capability, all these capabilities we just described to you.
This is an initiative that we've been working on for the past 6 months. And in fact, when many of you came in for a briefing in the commissioner's office 3 or 4 months ago, we had demonstrated the NYPD version, and we had committed to getting this new tool out by February. And so we're planning to live up to that commitment.
We have not changed. UCR came into being back in the 50s or 60s, Uniform Crime Reports. There have been minor changes in how crime has been reported through that system that the NYPD has always participated in. The only major change in crime reporting in New York State, New York City, was a few years ago when the law relative to how you reported a strangulation was changed, making it a felony. And so you could see an increase at that time in that categorization in aggravated assaults. Other than that, we have made no changes in how we report information to UCR or in the case of shootings. Shootings are a NYP-defined incident. In other words, shootings are captured within aggravated assault in UCR. Back in '94, when I was working with Jack Maple, we had with 5,000 shootings, we wanted more intimacy. So we defined what a shooting would be. We have made no changes in that definition. since 1994, when in the NYPD we created a focus on that particular problem that was huge. 5,700 people, I think, shot that year. Many other police departments around the country now track shootings, but they may have their own definition of what a shooting is, because it is not a specific defined category within UCR. What we're attempting to do is effectively, we're only as good as the information we get. That's why we want the public to call us, because that's how we assign our police officers. So with the benefit of ShotSpotter, for example, that gives us a much clearer picture of where our guns actually being used in the city versus just having murder victims or shooting victims or 911 calls. We now have this fourth element, which is the unreported incidents of gunshots being fired. So it's the continuing evolution of use of technology and use of technology to improve accountability on how we assign our personnel. Well, perception oftentimes is the reality for somebody. What we're trying to do as much as possible is present the reality, so that some instances we can push against perception, in some instances that we may actually reinforce the perception. But the reality of policing is that we're continually, trying to find better ways to ensure the accuracy of the information we work with. Because it really is life or death. I don't want to be sending my cops over here when I have the problem over here. And the beauty of the evolution of CompStat now since 1994, when we created it here to where it is today, it's great to see this evolution, because it really does allow us to assign our people in a much more precise manner. We have a number of predictive policing initiatives underway. We will actually be able to predict within a certain period of time, we want to have our cops at this location, because there's a likelihood there's going to be a shooting or there's going to be a robbery at that location based on an analysis of crime. It is 21st century policing. It's great. We always talk about preliminary crime numbers because the numbers do change. Great detective work, they investigate, they find that it's not the original story. The original story of the video we just showed you, that character reporting that he was shot by somebody else, when in fact he shot himself. That there is where a preliminary crime report changes from a shooting in which he was shot to a self-inflicted shooting. So what we are constantly trying to do is improve our accuracy. But it's like medicine. You get a good prescription from a doctor, sometimes you get a bad prescription. Similarly, we are only as good as the information that we get in the investigations we conduct. And in that regard, that the accuracy of our information is to the best of our ability. We have it monitored by UCR to comply with UCR standards of the federal government. We are creating a very large auditing unit in the police department to continually ensure the accuracy of our figures. But there will be variations. That's the nature of the business, that as we investigate, we find something that started off with this story ends up being something entirely different by the time we get the investigation complete.
Jump in a second. Listen, I think this is an important question because it gets at the history here. Before Bill Bratton was commissioner the first time, we didn't have CompStat. So bluntly, a lot of information was not being tracked. A lot of information was not being acted on. And I remember vividly New York City in the 1980s going into the 90s, a lot of folks felt that they could call about a problem and there was no response. You know, I think a lot of us remember certain kinds of crimes were considered unimportant given the much more horrible, violent crimes that were more pervasive at the time. So, you know, you've got something stolen, a lot of people would say, if I call it in, will anything even happen? When Commissioner Bratton took over in the early 90s, he put a focus on information and the accuracy of the information and the fact that it had to be discussed, it had to be owned by each precinct, and there had to be results, there had to be follow-through. That has continued and has deepened ever since. And now, as you see, more and more of this information is going to be made available to the public. We want that to happen. ShotSpotter, in effect, means there's much more to follow up on. But we paid for it. We wanted it. We wanted to know where those shots were that were going unreported. In a sense, some of the concern that's been raised suggests the notion of trying to minimize In fact, ShotSpotter is an example where we draw attention to shootings that we would not have known of because people didn't call them in. But we want that information because that's how we go after those hardened criminals. That's how we go after, as you've heard Dermot say, that targeted focus on the small number of hardened criminals who are doing the vast majority of the violence. So this is a point in a progression. There's going to be more transparency. There's going to be more information. I think it's going to help the public feel more comfortable. Obviously, 2,000 more cops in terms of patrol strength is going to help the public feel more comfortable. It's like everything else in public service. We have to earn it. We have to show people constant improvement. And obviously, if they themselves are a victim of a crime or if a crime happened on their block, they're going to be worried. They have a right to be worried. We have to constantly show them that our work is improving.
Way in the back here. I'll ask Bob Boyce to come up and bring you up to speed on, I think there's about 3 we're looking at that have been of interest the last 2 days.
In regards to the stabbing in the 50 precinct on Broadway in the McDonald's, sir, we have a worker there, a young man, was leaving that day, and there was someone sitting in the chairs in the McDonald's, and he had been there for several hours. This young man who was stabbed asked him to leave, and they walked out together. Now, apparently, this person might have been homeless. We're trying to find out right now because he was there for about 8 hours, and they knew him from the area. He walked out with the individual, and there was no problem initially. In the parking lot, there became a fight. We have a person who looked out the window and saw the two arguing, and then off camera, out of the view of the witness, he is stabbed in the back, and then stabbed in the chest as well as some defensive wounds. Also, he comes back into the restaurant, and then he's removed to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, where he's pronounced dead about an hour later. So right now, we're looking for this individual. We'll hope to have video to be put out to show who he is. Apparently, people up in the area know him. He comes in often to the restaurant, so that's the story there. If you want an update on the 6-1, we have a double homicide in Batchelder Street in the Sheepshead Bay houses. 2 individuals, a 40-year-old male and a 39-year-old female, were found by police being brought there by family members. The woman was sitting in a chair and the male was on the living room floor. We have arrested a 15-year-old in regards to that homicide. She is the daughter of the lady who was in the chair. We're still investigating this homicide to see who else was there, but she's been placed under arrest. She'll be charged with murder too, twice. This is the domestic violence homicide and shooting. Right now, we're trying to find out where she got the gun to commit the homicide.
If I may reference for just a moment the double homicide that the chief just discussed. On the bar graphs that we showed earlier, we showed 348 murders, preliminary. That figure is now 350 because investigation determined that double homicide actually occurred in 2015, so it needs to be incorporated into those numbers. So even as we're standing here with you now, those numbers are changing as we basically investigate and determine when that double homicide actually occurred. I'll ask, once again, Chief Boyce to give you what he has. I think some of the early reporting of the circumstances of that case was erroneous. So, Bob, if you have anything further on that.
Dean, we got a full narrative from that young lady and had changed some of the information initially, what she told us. She had a complaint against her mother, more so than her mother's boyfriend, that her mother was physically abusive to her on at least one occasion that she was able to articulate. So that's where we are with that. The mother's boyfriend did live with them, but she said basically it was the mother that actually was abusive to her, physically abusive to her in the past. We don't believe this is at all, initially, an act of self-defense. She went and got a gun from another individual that we're trying to find right now to commit the homicide. So that's not consistent with someone who was in self-defense at that time.
I don't see that the governor's executive order changes anything that we do. that we haven't already been doing. Going back to when I was Chief of Transit Police in 1990, Police Commissioner in 1994, Chief O'Neill will be issuing a finest message shortly, because tonight is believed is going to go below 32 degrees, in which our officers will be advised about cold weather procedures as it relates to people out in the street who might not be in shelter. So the executive order put out by the governor, that I don't see it changes anything that we actually do in the NYPD and have done for many, many years. That the governor basically issued an order that was statewide, that I'm not familiar with what other cities do. He also controls the police forces, the MTA, Port Authority, Port Authority, Penn Station, Grand Central Terminal. They all recently, Logan Airport, was redone, Logan Airport, my Boston roots, that LaGuardia Airport had homeless issues. So there are many state facilities where there are these issues that his mandate would be pertinent also. But as we're looking at it, that it really doesn't change significantly what we already have the tools to work with.
It's what I said earlier. We appreciate the intent for sure, but it doesn't, I agree with Commissioner Bratton, it doesn't change what we do and what we have done for many years. The state law is what's operative here, and the executive order, from our understanding, does not change that basic reality. So look, if someone's in danger, we will take them off the streets. That's always been the policy. That's NYPD policy. That's true of our Department of Health. That's true of our Department of Homeless Services. If we deem someone is in danger, we have the right to remove them. If they're not in danger, by law, the person has a right to be on the streets if they choose to be. But as I said earlier, there's three things that we're doing differently now. The Homestead Initiative, which is the biggest homeless outreach initiative of any city in this country, where we'll be crisscrossing the city, particularly Manhattan, between Canal Street and 145th Street, daily with city employees and with nonprofit outreach workers, constantly checking on homeless individuals for the purpose of getting them off the streets permanently. And I want to emphasize this. We care deeply about cold weather conditions. We also care, by the way, about heat alerts, which have been more common lately. But we want to get people off the streets across the board. We don't want anyone living on our streets. So that Homestead Initiative will every day be working to get people off the streets. Obviously, will be very usable when there are particularly difficult moments like climate problems and weather problems. And we'll have people out constantly engaging the homeless to bring them in. So that's one. Code Blue, which we greatly intensified when I came into office. It previously did not apply to families, so families could not come into shelter automatically. Now, it doesn't matter if you're an individual or a family, you can come into any of our shelters, no questions asked, when we have a weather emergency. You don't have to go through the normal intake. That's something I did one of the first days in office as mayor. And then the initiative that we talked about, NYC Safe, where we're tracking people with mental health problems and a history of violence, and we're ensuring that there's very specific follow-up in each case, whether it might be law enforcement follow-up or mental health services that we make sure they get. These are all substantial policy changes that are going to have a real impact on the ground. So all of those initiatives are going on, as Commissioner Bratton said, for years and years. If the NYPD thought anyone was in danger, in distress, they of course have the right to bring them in and get them treatment. Again, the intent is appreciated. I think Commissioner Bratton's right. In other parts of the state or in state-run elements, the airports, for example, the train stations run by the state could be very helpful. But in terms of the NYPD, it's something we've already been doing. Yeah, right over here. Say again? Say again? Stops. How many stops? The shelters absolutely have to be improved, and that's part of what we've invested in. Look, when I came into office, for years, our shelters have been substandard. We put together a repair squad after a report done earlier in 2015 by my commissioner of investigation that I requested. Came back with a report. He said a lot of these shelter facilities aren't up to the standard they should be. We put together a rapid repair squad. We're now, I think, between 70 and 80% of those violations have been cured. We'll get you the exact numbers, but we're continuing to work on every one of those violations to fix them. So we're committed to improving the quality of our shelters. But beyond that, there's been a safety issue in shelters for years, in fact, for decades. We've added hundreds of peace officers to patrol those shelters. We have a much closer relationship now between NYPD and Department of Homeless Services to help ensure that there's safety in the shelters. If there's anybody who's problematic, and they break any law, they'll be dealt with by NYPD. If there's someone, as I said, with a history of violence and mental health issues, we'll isolate them away from the shelter population, get them to the kind of separate care they need. So there are very real things that have to be fixed in our shelters. We're on that case, but the second thing we did, which is crucial to getting people off the streets, we just added 500 more safe haven beds. Some of you may have been at the announcement I did with Cardinal Dolan. A lot of these are being managed by houses of worship. The Archdiocese is playing a particularly crucial role. Listen to the difference here. A shelter could be many dozens of people, hundreds of people, and a lot of folks who are living on the street feel scared to go in that environment, don't feel secure, have had bad experiences. A safe haven is maybe 10 people, 15 people, in a house of worship in many cases, a much more intimate and supportive environment. And what we've seen is a lot of people resistant to shelter will go into a safe haven, will accept mental health services, will accept substance abuse services, and it's a chance to get them off the street permanently. And what is the other piece of the equation, supportive housing? We announced a commitment to 15,000 apartments, the most the city has ever committed to. We're going to follow through on that. We obviously would like to see the state join us in that. This is how we get people off the streets permanently. And yes, we have to continue to make the shelters safer and better for anyone who ends up in them, but our goal is to make sure people get out of shelter. 22,000 out of shelter so far since I took office. We want to speed that process up and get people out of shelter and to better housing.
Commissioner, the tool that was demonstrated earlier regarding that officer vehicles, the senior history, how crucial is that for the department?
It has multiple purposes and multiple benefits. From a management perspective, as Jesse indicated, it will improve our ability to get the closest police car to a call for service, to get that car there, because we will be able to, one, visibly see it, but the computer will also see it also. So the computer will be able to eventually determine what is the closest cars to the pulling cars from miles away. Secondly, it will allow us to have the history of that vehicle, so when we get a complaint, for example, that comes in that I had an incident with an officer day before yesterday on this corner at this time, we would have the ability to identify, was there in fact a New York City police car on that corner at that time. From an officer safety standpoint, officers so frequently, in the midst of turmoil, gunfights, whatever, officer in trouble calls, are not able to give a correct location. And very frequently during incidents, they are giving incorrect locations in the excitement of what's going on. We would be able to determine exactly where that vehicle is so that instead of going to an incorrect address, we can get there much more quickly. So the benefits, officer safety, the benefits for accountability, the benefits for management of resources, phenomenal benefits for officers, for the public, and for the management of the department. Thank you all.